What's in the box? What's in the fucking box?
Hello everybody and welcome to What's in the Box! Today we've got kind of a special little one because we are going to deal with Forge Master Syntherion. Syntherion is the Convergence Battlebox Warcaster, and he's one of my favorites. He's heavily upkeep dependent, but oh, is he a meanie. And he can run jacks like it's nobody's business. We'll get into his special abilities in a sec, but I have a really interesting one for you today because we're going to do one of the most fiddly warcasters I've ever seen, who is Syntherion here, and we have two versions of him. We have the plastic version that you get in the battle box, and we have the Privateer Press exclusive metal version. So, unlike a lot of casters that have been around for a long time, because Convergence is so new, the only way to get the plastic version of Syntherion is to actually get him in the battle box. Now, when I started on Convergence, I immediately bought a pair of battle boxes because the other jacks that came in the battle box were so useful that I knew I would use them. That left me with an extra plastic Syntherion, and that is why we can do a What's in the Box of the plastic Syntherion today. You might not see a lot of videos about how to put together the plastic Syntherion, but I think there should be about 800 because he is one of the most complex little guys, and there are certain little pieces that if you don't know where they go or are missing, you're going to be in a lot of trouble, and you might not even know that you're missing one. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with the plastic Syntherion, and then we're going to move to the metal one, and we'll look at a couple of the differences between the two models and some things that you might want to look for when you're putting them together. So without further ado, let's go on to the plastic. So because this guy didn't originally come in a blister, I've just got all the parts in here. They would have come in the plastic tray. This plastic tray is the one that you'll see either in a heavy kit, or you'll find two of them generally in a battle box. The card lays in the central portion, and then the bag of plastics goes in here. Syntherion comes in one of those trays, and when you open up the package, you end up with this, just a mess of tiny little bits. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in, and we're going to take a look at all these little bits and where they go and what they're doing. Alrighty. Oop. We're a little too far. Focus. There we go. So let's get these guys out of the way, and we'll start with some of the big pieces. This is the lower portion of Syntherion. Now, as you can see, that he, like some of the, like the large ball from Crix, are designed to actually just sit on a single point. They've slightly reinforced this point with some small rock detailing, but basically he's just standing on the very tip of his motivator drive here. This drive was actually invented in the fluff by Aurora, the Newman of Ariogenesis. She was the one who came up with the floating ability for Convergence. If we flip him over, we can see that Syntherion really looks almost identical from either side, which makes him assembling him a little bit interesting. You will notice, though, that on one side you've got a higher Art Deco line than on the other side. So let's get him out of the way and go to the next big piece, which is his torso. Let's get him in a spot where everybody can see him. This is Syntherion. So again, keeping with that Art Deco style, almost what you might call a metropolis style. You can see his head there. It's not easy to see on the bare plastic, but he does have quite a few of these large orbs. People tend to paint those either in brass or sometimes in colors. My paint scheme on the Syntherion you saw earlier is very simplistic, so it doesn't have any of those nice detailing. But even with a very basic paint scheme, you can just paint him up metal, give him a quick metal wash, and he looks great. The next big piece that you'll see, and we've got two of these, are the arm sections. These arm sections attached to either side with some tiny little pins that I will find one here. Unfortunately, the Syntherion is missing one of his pins. And if you don't know that this little piece of plastic is an integral part of the model, you might either just throw it away or think it was sprue. But this little pin actually attaches between this section here and the hole on the side of Syntherion's torso. And we'll lay him out in just a second so that you can see all the different bits. These are really neat because not only do they have a lot of really good detailing in like the little tubes and wires and all the gearing, but they have these really neat slots on the top that are used to put in Syntherion's tools. If you flip him over, you're going to find there is one hole on the bottom here. Let's get that in frame. There's this one little hole on the bottom here, and that is designed to receive this tiny little piece. Again, another little piece that you might think was just extra off-cast, but these guys actually drop into that hole, just sort of finishing off the tubes here on the bottom. So let's get these guys out of the way. And what we're basically left with is 1,000 tiny arms, or more to the point, 8 of them. You're going to have 4 to a side. So let's turn this guy around so you can take a look. We've got a sort of ray gunny drill arm here. We have Declaw. Declaw seems to be slightly shortened on this this Syntherion model. We have another great grappler arm here. This one 3-fingered. We have a saw. We have a nice little, looks like a pliers type tool. Here we see one of the force hammers. There's the other force hammer. These are basically look like tiny little versions of action and reaction, which are Axis's hammers. And my favorite, the steampunk ray gun. This is, I think, the neatest little bit on the plastic Syntherion. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and we're going to lay out Syntherion for all those people who have just gotten their Convergence battle box and they're staring at the giant pile of parts that comes in that battle box. Let's get him laid out. So we start with the torso, or with the lower body, and then the torso on top. We have the large arm section on each side. We have the attachments to the bottom of the arm section. We have the shoulder pin. Now I've only got one of these right now on this plastic model, but they are very important. They'll tie in between the arm and the shoulder. And then on each side, you'll have an array of 4 tools, each one able to be swapped out to get the best look for your Syntherion. So there is the plastic Syntherion all splayed out. So you take all these guys, they slide into their slots, and you glue him together. It's a relatively simple build once you know where everything is, but because he is has so many pieces, it's really easy to mess them up. So now that we've seen the plastic Syntherion, let's go over to the metal one. So here is the Privateer Press exclusive metal Syntherion. Now, when I say Privateer Press exclusive, what I mean is a model that is only sold directly by Privateer Press. You won't find this in your local game store. You'll only find it at either the online store from Privateer Press, or you'll find it at conventions. So if we take a quick look here, like all blister packs, you're going to actually see at the top here the model, Forge Master Syntherion, what his role is, warcaster, and then his PIP number. In this case, we're looking at 36029, and that's the metal Syntherion model. So let's get him out of his little plastic prison and find out exactly what's in here. So again, underneath the paper, you're always going to find your cards. Make sure to pull those out before you discard the upper paper. We'll take a look at those cards in a second. Behind the foam, we have a nice Generation 3 Privateer Press medium base. A flight stand, which not a lot of people have probably seen yet. They're most common in Convergence, but you do actually find flight stands in Legion on both the Blight Wasps and the new Seraph Neraph kit. I believe that's it right now. There may be more models by the time this goes live, but at the time of filming, those were the only models that I could think of. So to keep going with what we did before, here we have the lower body. Now, this lower body is easy to tell the front and back because unlike the plastic, the back of the metal body has this indentation, which is where the flight stand attaches. By the way, I would highly recommend either pinning your flight stand if you can do it, if you've got a small enough pin, or be aware that this big metal guy is going to break off this tiny plastic base. It will just happen, be aware of it, and be ready to repair it. Some people will actually replace these flight stands with either like piano wire or some heavy gauge wire, or sometimes they will do like a crackling effect around his base off of the medium base with wires to make a sort of electrical look. Next, we have his torso. That's his back. Unlike the plastic torso, this one already comes with those little pegs installed, so we don't have to worry about losing them. Next, we're going to get into his arms. Now, the metal Syntherion has a little bit of a different setup than the plastic one because his large arm parts actually come in 4 pieces. So we have 2 left and 2 right. So here we have our inner pieces and our outer pieces. Now I'm flipping these guys over so that you can see how they assemble. These 2 that have the small holes in the body are the inner pieces, and those are the ones that will attach here. And then these 2 larger, or these 2 that have the decoration in the center are the outer pieces. So they actually glue to the inside of these inners, and you can see that when I flip these guys over, flip these guys all over, you'll be able to see where the pins line up to make a good solid connection. One of the big differences between the plastic models and the metal models is that on plastics, because they're light and they can be keyed, you don't have to put in a lot of support to the model. On the metals, you actually will have to put in a lot of support. We have these keys put in. These are already connected. All these are set up so that you can actually have support for your model. And then after that, we have many arms, just like on the other model. Now, because this is a newer model and there is no defects with it, I checked it when I got them, we actually have all the fingers and everything on all of these. The one thing we will have to do is, because of the way metal is cast, we can't do this easy three-fingered arm. So this little three-fingered position is hard to do in metal. So we have that same arm in the metal, only has 2 fingers. I think you can see that there. And we have 1 extra finger that we're going to have to attach ourselves. So now I'm going to set up this Syntherion just the way I set up the plastic one. Now, all of the actual devices, like the saws and the ray gun and the big steampunk ray gun here, are all exactly the same. It seems to be the same mold as the plastics, but because they're metals, they seem a little bit sharper to me. Now, that's not always the case, but it does seem to be in this one. So I'm going to organize this guy just like I did for the plastic, so that you can see how to assemble them. Now, this guy, as I said, is a little bit easier to understand his assembly because you don't have those tiny pins that you had on the metals, or on the plastics. But here we go. So there is your upper torso, your lower body. We'll put the flight stand here to the side of it, and the base just down here at the bottom, just peeking out. And then we have the attaching arms on one side. That guy over. And the attaching arm on the other side. And then the outer arm on this side. And the outer arm on this side. And then we have our different arms. We have our grasper and our force hammer. We have our pliers and our ray gun and our second grasper with its extra finger and the little drill. And there you have it. There's all the bits in the metal Syntherion. So one last thing we're going to do is take a look at Centurions Card. So we'll get all this out of the way. We'll bring out Centurions Card. Now we'll do a little zoom in so we can see his card a little bit better. Syntherion is a 6-focus warcaster who works for the Convergence of Cyrss. You can see that he's speed 5, like almost all of our warcasters except Aurora. Strength 9, Mat 6, Rat 5, Def 13, Arm 18, which is kind of ridiculous, and Command 10. He also has 2 symbols there that you won't have seen probably on a lot of cards that aren't warjacks. This symbol means that he's a construct. Because he's a robot and not a humanoid, he's a construct, which means that he's not living, and it also means that he can be repaired by people that can repair constructs. Also, because he's a floating body, he has Pathfinder. He has 2 weapons, Static Bolt, which is typed electricity, which is a range 11, rate of fire, POW 11 weapon, and his Workshop Array, which is 2 POW 14 weapons. I have found that Syntherion can do a lot of work in the front lines because his Workshop Arrays on the charge can be devastating. Now, Convergence Warcasters, unlike Warlocks or most other Warcasters, have a thing called a Field Marshal. Now, Syntherion's Field Marshal is excellent. It's auto repair. So models in this models battle group game auto repair. During your control phase, remove D3 damage points from models with auto repair. So basically, when you get into your control phase, you just roll a D3 for every model in your battle group that's been damaged, and they all get D3 points back, which is usually enough to bring any system online. Like any non-human warcasters in Convergence, he has Clockwork Vessel, So he counts as a living model only for the purposes of generating soul tokens. So that means that if you have something that does like an extra die of damage against living, doesn't work on this guy. He is repairable because he's a construct. Other models can make bodge, repair special actions, or repair this model as if it was a warjack, which is amazing because even though he has 18 boxes, you can just top him right up. And resourceful. I love this on a upkeep caster. This model can upkeep spells on models in its battle group without spending focus. One thing to point out as we flip over to his spell card is that Syntherion actually has one enemy cast upkeepable spell. So you always have to make sure that when you have cast that spell that you're not upkeeping it for free, because there will be a tendency to forget that it's only friendly upkeeps and do that. So he's got his nuke, or his poke, which in this case is Convection. It's a cost 2, range 10, POW 12 spell, and if it kills an enemy living model, I get to give 1 focus point to a warjack in this model's battle group that it's in its control area. It's important that you see that it says control area there, because Convergence has a lot of ways to get focus around the board, and you have to make sure that you give it to somebody that is still in your control area. Hotshot is great on AoEs. Target model in this model's battle group gains boosted ranged attack damage rolls. So if you do an AoE, everything that gets hit by that AoE is going to get boosted. Magnetic Hold, this is his offensive upkeep. Target model unit suffers -2 speed and defense. Friendly faction models with construct charging an affected model gain +2 inches of movement. Now, since he's a construct and everybody in his battle group is likely to be a construct, and realistically with Convergence everybody in his army is likely to be a construct, it basically gives everybody +2 movement to attack these people. And because it gives -2 speed, that unit that gets hit by that can't charge. So it makes Bane Thralls very unhappy. Reconstruct is an amazing spell. It is an upkeep. When a target warjack in this model's battle group is disabled by an enemy attack, anytime except while it's advancing, place it anywhere within 3 inches of its current location, remove 1 damage point from each system, then Reconstruct expires. So the important here is place it any place within 3 inches. So that essentially means that it gets a 3-inch move, and then it gets 1 damage point back in each of its systems, and then Reconstruct expires. You can put Reconstruct on a Prime Axiom, which is the Colossal, but it will not get the movement, so it comes back exactly where it was standing. And perhaps the best bit on this card is Synergy. While in its control area, models in this model's battle group gain a +1 cumulative bonus on melee attack and melee damage rolls for each other model in the battle group that hit an enemy model with melee attacks on this turn while in this model's control area. So that all boils down to every time I hit you, the next model to attack gets +1/+1. So if my first warjack hits, he's at his normal strength and mat. If the second guy gets a +1 to his mat and strength, the third guy gets a +2, fourth guy gets a +3. It's really, really powerful. Yes, El Dukes, we just had someone point out on the stream that it is, in fact, not just a 3-inch move, but it's 3 inches plus the size of the base. And that can be ridiculous on a large base model because it essentially gives it a 5-inch movement, which in my experiences is often enough to take a jack and put it in a place that it can next turn charge a warcaster. And I've had plenty of kills that way. So that's Syntherion's spells. His feat is really interesting. It's called Technological Superiority, and it is large and dense. But basically, what it does is give everybody weapon platform. Weapon platform. A model with weapon platform can make a melee and a ranged attacks in the same activation. When a model with weapons platform makes its initial melee attacks or power attacks, it can also make its initial ranged attacks. Model with weapons platform can make ranged attacks even while in melee. So everybody gets to punch and everybody gets to shoot, and then they can start buying attacks, which is an amazing feat, especially on something like a Prime Axiom or a monitor that has sustained attack and the Ripsaw Flinger, or even if you're getting rid of a lot of infantry, the Cypher, where it's dropping those 4-inch AoEs. So, because the chat is talking about the fact that everybody gets an AoE, I'll just mention that Syntherion's tier lets him cast all of his upkeeps for 1 point less, even during on his first turn. So that means that everybody gets their upkeeps. Yes, a good thing brought up by Elduke. It's important to note that weapon platform, they still suffer the target in melee penalty, even if they're shooting at something they're in melee with themselves. So there is always that negative. All right, so we have looked at Syntherion, we've looked at his metal, and we've looked at his plastic, and we've even had a very quick look at an assembled Syntherion. So we're going to say that's it for this episode of What's in the Box.